the end of last year.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So let me just confirm that we are in Artist Awaken Broadcasting. And do you want to head over to your art station? Might be wise
Sure.
to start us there. That way everybody can see, how to reach you outside of this. Or not reach you, but see your
Sure.
work.
Let us hope that it's still logged in to me. Oh, no, it's not. Of course not. Let's see. Password saved. Let's hope so. There we go.
All right. And where's your profile page so they know? Adam Ross. Good. Fantastic. All right. So thanks for being here. This is just really a treat. I've been watching your work and your career and all that stuff for a while. So it's really exciting to have this conversation with you.
Oh, ditto, man. You're a superstar. So it's great to finally talk to you after all these years of being lurking friends on Facebook.
Yes. Okay, so let me see. I don't want to share that screen. We're sharing your screen. I'm recording. All right, I always get confused with all this technical stuff. So, all right, we're on your screen, and then those in Artist Awake are hearing me. All right, guys, those of you on Artist Awake, give me some likes so that I know that you are there. And Isaac, Jane, Lance, can you guys just make sure that you can hear me and Adam? Make sure everything's good.
Mm-hmm. Everything looks good to me. Let me get back over here to.
Yeah, Jane says it's good. Narcissus says it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, great. All right, thanks for hitting that like over there, Deborah. All right, guys. So this is kind of a real treat. I opened this up for everybody in Artist Awake, so I wanted to make sure that everybody had access to kind of see this, not just my boot campers. So we're going to open this up for questions in a bit, but right now I want to just get a few interview questions down and get a sense of things. So let's start, Adam, with where you work. Where are you working now?
I work at Marvel Studios here on the Disney lot here in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
I work in the visual development department, where we're responsible for creating a bulk of all the concept sketches and models that cover primarily characters, but we also get into the props as well.
Cool. And so is that where Josh Herrmann used to work, or is it a different department?
Yes. Yes, I actually replaced Josh after he left for Cloud Imperium.
Yeah.
Because of where I worked, like I worked for a lot of the vendors that kind of, tertiary to Marvel, where we would actually take the concept of models and then actually build the props and the suits.
Mm-hmm.
And so over a period of years, I got to know Josh and Ryan and Andy and the gang here at Marvel.
Yeah.
And so when Josh left, that close relationship and like knowing the ins and outs of how things worked, and plus what I'd done, just kind of dovetailed together really well. So I ended up taking Josh's job after he left.
That's sweet. All right. So what does that job entail? Because I know I've interviewed Josh on this, and Josh had this really specific, like he had a skill set with Maya and like all these different elements. I mean, I think even he used to be able to do some effects, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do there?
The job description is still, I'd say, pretty much the same as what when Josh was here.
Yeah.
Although over time, with the advent of like Zbrush expanding in its ability so much and 3D printing gaining in popularity, I mean, when I was at Legacy, we were one of pretty much only a couple studios that utilized it. So all those technologies swimming upstream into this department, the duties I have are a little bit different than what Josh used to have. I still do work with Ryan and work with the other concept artists to help more fully realize their concepts in 3D. But at the same time, I do also work with the vendors to kind of, I guess, make sure that the concepts maintain their cohesiveness or maintain the general idea further through the pipeline.
Yeah.
So I will do, fairly advanced models to pass on to VFX and to the costume vendors.
Okay, got it. All right, and then Jane and Lance, can you guys make sure that everybody else in the Character Artist Bootcamp is in here as well? Just to shoot something in the note. So with Josh, one of the things I was noticing was just that he was working directly with Ryan Miner, Dean, and some of the other guys to really help them develop the concepts. And when Josh was doing it, it was a very new thing. It was like concept that, because Ryan can draw like crazy, right? You can draw and paint like
Yeah,
mad.
yeah. It's always. I love Ryan, but it's always embarrassing working around him just because of how insanely talented he is and how fast he
Yeah,
lays it down. You know.
I get that. I mean, just looking at his work, it's just, there's very few people with that level of skill working. It's quite amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. And a full understanding of 3D as well. Even though like Ryan has gotten into incorporating a lot of 3D into facilitating his 2D concepts.
Hmm.
And that's increasing across the board with, pretty much all the concept guys. But yeah, his understanding of 3D in a 2D space is also phenomenal. So him being able to come up and even look over your work and help you figure out, okay, what's not quite right about a piece you're working on, because he sees in 3D and can work in 2D, which a lot of guys, that transition between the two is kind of rough for him, but he does it seamlessly.
That's great. And so at that point, they were really trying to figure out the pipeline. Do you think that, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it pretty clear now how Concept is using you as a 3D, as a sculptor and a 3D artist?
Oh yeah. I think that's solidified quite a bit,
Hmm.
to the point to where we're not really expanding that as much, or because it's already kind of set in stone, like
Yeah.
what that process looks like.
Yep.
But now we're actually saying, okay, well, what else can we do with 3D to keep pushing the 2D forward, or how can we use 3D to better express these concepts, whether it be like through an effect or through a texture on a model as opposed to just painting. Are we providing even higher quality alphas, for actual use in the pipeline for after it gets past us.
Good, great. And that's I was thinking that was the case. So I want to really kind of dive into that because you know, you guys are at the concept edge, which is the first, it's like the leading edge. And
Hmm.
before it used to be, hey, let's just throw some 2D concepts. Maybe somebody will go out and sculpt it. And then Neville Page and guys like him were doing 3D concepts. I know Avatar was a
Hmm.
big turning point for our industry. James Cameron had like, I think he had a traditional guy, he had a 2D guy, and he had a 3D guy, or a group of
Hmm.
people like that, and trying to see who beat who. Who does it the fastest, and
Yeah.
and so I think that that's been all locked in. That 3D is now so crucial to it. But where does your work now go? Because you can now you provide kind of finished 3D pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's I say finished. It varies in degree based, obviously based upon time we have
Hmm.
or what the requirements are. So like for Hulk, for example,
Yeah,
I don't
let's
know.
look
Can you
at
still see
the
my screen?
yeah, let's look at Hulk. That'd be great. And this is for the
Okay,
last yeah, this is for Thor.
Thor. This is for Ragnarok. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is also in the Art of book as well.
cool.
Um, So in this case, sometimes we'll have a lot of time to plan for something. So we will provide like I can provide a fully retopped, textured model
Yeah.
to the vendor. But some cases, like something comes up late in the game, and they're like, well, we need to get this done in like 2 or 3 weeks and hammer this thing out, as opposed to having a longer period of time to kind of finesse things. And so some pieces will end up being retopped. Some pieces like are just really polished Dynamesh sculpts,
Yeah.
which leave it to somebody else to do the final retop on.
Yeah.
Which I have to say, by the way, after having left our department, the guys that all worked on this model like really faithfully carried it over into the film.
Mm-hmm. Got it. All right. So your job, it's still like it's still concept. You're still
Hmm.
there's still some looseness. You're not finishing everything all the way because you're not doing
No,
materials.
no. We just try to basically, so like we use, or I use the Zbrush, and I use Keyshot.
Hmm.
And obviously, with Keyshot, you're not getting environmental effects or those things. Though the materials in Keyshot aren't going to carry over into the VFX pipeline.
Yeah.
So what I'm turning over, as far as the model itself, will just represent the volume or the detail, but then the Keyshot renders will just represent, okay, this is the overall color, the feeling, the types of materials that we're looking for. So those aspects of materials don't always carry over. I assume, or figuring that some of our alphas do,
Hmm.
but studios have such very different pipelines that they will then readapt it all into how they work.
Okay, got it. And how much of the material or the texturing do you do in ZBrush? How much in Keyshot?
Um, Me, that's changed recently, especially since this piece.
Yeah.
I did pretty much all of it in ZBrush,
Okay.
with like the paint. But then like materials wise, I'll always try to convert it over to some sort of just base material in ZBrush and just keep my my 2D textures intact.
Yeah.
So like say for the skin on Hulk, I maintained the exact same coloring and paint job that I did in ZBrush, but then we'll just assign a basically tweaked skin shader and key shot so that it gets the quality of skin but maintains the paint job.
Got it. All right, cool. And what do they give you to start with? So obviously with Hulk and Iron Man and all these, there's a vast avoir of reference and style guides and stuff like that. But like when you start a project now, what do you get to work with?
Actually, let me get over here. Can you still see my screen?
Uh-huh.
All right, hang on a sec. Let's see if this will open up here. If I can, I'll show you. I'm
seeing still Thor though.
Are you still seeing? You're still seeing that?
Hulk, yeah.
All right. If you're still seeing Hulk, then it's not letting me. Let me see if I can pull it up through here. Can you see me going through my file manager right now?
No. Is it on another monitor or?
No, it's on this monitor actually.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's stuck here. So you can stop sharing and then reshare.
Okay.
That works.
Let me see. Where's the stop sharing on here?
You got to go back to the go to meeting tab.
Oh, stop sharing screen. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Let me see if I can pull this up. See if it'll open. See if I can share again. Just in lieu of that, while I'm trying to get this open, it varies like what I'll get from the 2D guys. Most of the time, it is somewhat of a hybrid. Like they will start with the 3D model. But that, let me see. That's strange. It's not letting me open it up here in GoToMeeting. Like I will get, like a very base 3D model sometimes where literally guys will do like most of their paint over work in Photoshop to get that concept where it needs to be. Some cases like Ryan, based upon how much time he has, if he has a base model to go from, then he might give me just a 2D painting. And like if you look through the Art of Thor book, literally for Hulk, I started with a 2D model. We do have it's still not open up. That's really strange.
Your screen's not sharing too, by the way.
Yeah. I'll go back and share it again.
All right.
And we'll get back to the art station. Can you see my screen again?
Yeah, back on
okay,
Hulk.
Back on Hulk. Yeah, that's strange. But yeah, so like we'd start off with Hulk, start off with 2D, but we do have access to prior models. So as opposed to, sit there and say, okay, well, I can take all this glory and build a Hulk from the ground up. Well, we already have a prior Hulk model that we know VFX is going to start from. Yeah. So we'll just start dressing pre-existing models. So I do try to build libraries. I've always tried to be like that because with commercial art, time is always of the essence. So I have zero shame in going back and repurposing old models, especially in a case where you're actually building it on the same character that's going to be used in the film.
Got it. Yeah. All right. And when you're working on something like Hulk, what is your thinking process for how you do this? Like, in terms, especially with somebody like him, there's so much muscle, there's so much.
Yeah.
Is he big boned?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I mean, just my perception is he's like a over muscled toddler.
Okay.
It's like he just. But when it comes to dressing him, we do sit there and try, take in consideration how he tends to move and how he has moved on screen. So that we don't try not to end up in places where the costume is going to cause a lot of problems. That being said, though, that's not something that you're always having at the forefront of your mind, but you just kind of learn to keep it as an undercurrent when you're working on things. Yeah. And the guys here have done it for so long, like Ryan and Andy and Anthony Francisco and Jackson and Rodney and Ian and the gang. It's like it's second nature. So at that point, it pretty much becomes to how do we adhere to the concept as much as possible without watering it down.
Got it. And so the starts in ZBrush, you're creating some models, shooting them back and forth. Like, how long do you have to work on these projects?
Uh, it varies. I mean, sometimes they'll sit there and say, okay, well, immediately for this one shot, we need, like, say, Hulk's helmet.
Yep.
And that was the first thing I started on. And that was pretty much, sometimes what we thought was like, this is going to be the only piece they're going to need from us for this, which eventually turned into doing the whole thing. But for the helmet, at the time I was working from home because they hadn't remodeled the studio at that point.
Mm-hmm.
There was no room for me. And so Ryan just called me up and said, hey man, we need his helmet. Like today, when can you have it? And so pretty much I had the rough over to him in about 2 or 3 hours, working from his concept, just us bouncing back and forth.
And was your deliverable a 3D model or a final image?
Yes. Deliverable was a 3D model and later on a render, because a lot of times in the process, a vendor will sit there and say, okay, well, we're not really going to, we know you're going to send us this final render,
Mm-hmm.
but we need, say, a 3D asset now to go ahead and get started in the process, because we know we're going to have to retop, or we know we're going to have to figure these things out. And so sometimes those follow at different rates. Sometimes they go all together. It just varies based upon production needs.
Do you know what drove that need to get Hulk's head like right away? Was it some vendor requirement or?
At the time, I don't know, but sometimes sometimes they'll shuffle a shot around and say, okay, well, we're not going to be able to do these shots right now, so let's move this up.
Yeah.
In this particular case, I wasn't sure. I'd say maybe a third of the time I find out why stuff got moved around. But the rest of the time, it's just whatever the needs were of production, and we, do whatever we can to facilitate that and make it happen.
Yeah. Got it. All right, let's check your art station. I want to look at some more work and get some more process. And you said there's a chance we can get into ZBrush?
We'll see. We'll see how this works here. When you, like, anytime you sit there and be like, oh yeah, let's do it, and somebody comes over to look at your screen and the computer just goes, wah, wah.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take a look at some of your older stuff. I'd love to talk about your history,
okay.
like how you got into this, what kind of education you did, and
okay.
how you feel like your work has evolved over the years. So I don't know how old your art station goes.
This actually, the oldest piece, the one piece that's not on here, actually it's not going to be on here. Let me see I'm bringing this up. Can you see Mary Jane?
Yep.
Okay. The first piece I did before this was actually, I started off at Gentle Giant 15 years ago.
Okay.
I went to school at Savannah College of Art and Design, majored in computer art.
Yeah.
At the time, they wouldn't let you focus on modeling. They actually forced you to do a animation, the 3D modeling, the texturing, I understand, wraps into it, but they really didn't let you focus a lot.
Right.
So after SCAD, and I knew I wanted to model, I had to take a whole year to retool my portfolio again exactly towards modeling, which led to me getting an internship at Gentle Giant.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, they were still using scans as kind of like a supplement to the sculpting process.
Yeah.
And most everything was like, we would model some props. But while I was there, I did a piece for Ratchet and Clank, because Insomniac Games was right down the street from us. And they had like a 10th anniversary piece. Okay. And I modeled the entire Ratchet and Clank in Maya. And so that was their first piece they had done completely digitally as a character. Yeah. And mine as well. From there, I moved to McFarlane, where McFarlane hired me to build their digital department. Yep. They just recently got some scanners and 3D printers. And
is that where
we were doing
is that where Steve Lord is now? Or were you?
I think Steve, if he was there, and I we were friends when. And we still know each other. When I was there, I believe he still works for them. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to him.
He left McFarlane, and I forget exactly where he joined. So it must have been that's where he was when we were
okay.
Okay.
And now I know he does a lot of work for Sideshow now. So yes, maybe that's where he landed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So with McFarlane, they dipped their toes in the water a lot more, because digital was still pretty new. The 3D printing thing, as far as production process, is still really new. So being at Gentle Giant really, I felt, put me at the vanguard of that.
Yeah. And
I really latched onto it and embraced it. So when they had me build the department at McFarlane, I was really trying to push more for this, 3D sculpting and printing. Right. And at the time, they felt really comfortable with just, like, say, leaving us to model hard surfaces. They really they had a lot of traditional sculptors, and they're like, okay, for our pipeline, we want to keep it traditional. And so I did this piece here, Mary Jane, with Martin Brooks, who's a Marvel artist. and I paid for it myself, paid for the print, paid for the paints by Kat Sapien, who is also at Sideshow now, amazing painter.
Mm.
And I took this entire painted piece in and presented it. And even after that, they still felt that, okay, you know, we still prefer our Python, which is fine, works great for them. But for me, I was like, this is the direction I wanted to grow.
Right.
So that year at Comic-Con, I took this piece to Sideshow, and Tom Gilliland, who I sat down with him and Mark Brooks, and he looked at it and was like, this is awesome, when you want to start.
Nice.
And so I left McFarlane and had like 2 years of work just right out of the gate.
Oh man, that's awesome. So that's really neat. So you financed this thing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You did all the work after hours or on the job?
After hours. After hours.
Yeah.
Always made sure to do things after hours. I cleared it with them. I even know, because I was running the department,
Yep.
one of the things is never assume that anything is okay.
Yep.
And the guys, the president, Ed Frank, and vice president Andy Frank, they were they're cool about it. And I said, look, I'm going to pay for the material. Here's how much it costs. And so just financed the whole thing because, I want it to be a clean process,
Yeah. I get that. And how much did this thing cost, if you can tell me, like to finance that yourself?
I think total for me for printing and painting, I think was somewhere at the time around $2,500.
Wow. That's a big investment to just do all your own.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just really saw where it was headed. I mean, we were doing some slightly organic work with some of the Dragons line at the time, I think, like rough on the wings, but we weren't doing, like, they still wanted McFarlane has a very specific feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And even at the time, I mean, I'd have to admit, even at the time, it would have been very hard to capture the same sculpting feel that had been cultivated at McFarlane, that we know they had spent all these years copying or trying to emulate Todd's style and texturing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were still just doing very basic forms, but like I said, I knew this is where I wanted to go. So I felt for me that was what I wanted to push through with and take a risk. And that risk, it paid off big time, which really launched my freelance career and eventually led to Legacy and the film work and now to Marvel.
That's awesome. All right, let's head back to your art station. I remember this. Was this put at Zbrush Central?
Yeah, this piece, it's funny because this piece was at Zbrush Central, also did a tutorial, I think, on 3D Buzz, on 3D Total.
Yep.
And outlined the whole thing. Because at the time, I was using a very expensive piece of soft Magix to do all of my boolean functions and all my cutting work.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine who was at Legacy at the time saw the tutorial, and they were just finished up Iron Man 1, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, like every channel, like they wanted to run a practical like line through for whatever practical prop. They were having to model it in. And he saw my tutorial, and then he brought it to the gang. And then it's funny because then they implemented the basic process that I'd come up with for my work.
Nice.
And then, magically 3 years later, then I'm working at Legacy. So it's funny how like such a small world it is.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really important to emphasize the role that education has in that, like just constantly putting stuff out, educating people, helping them understand. And then you never know where that leads. So that led you right back to Legacy and then on from there.
Exactly. Well, because when I went into interview, I mean, it was just like, okay, just another guy they're going to interview. And then Jason Lopes, who was the head of the 3D printing. Yeah. And they're doing the interview, and they're kind of like, okay, who's this guy? And then Jason goes, oh, this is the guy that did the tutorial and the Mary Jane and all that stuff and Magix. And they're like, oh. And so like, then it kind of like all fell into place. And because there was the great thing is other than learning some of their basic processes, like literally I just plugged right in. There was no more training required because I had taken all that time to learn.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, actually, if you don't mind, I want you to click on a link so that people can see this. I'm going to post it into the messages.
Okay.
That I just found your post on Zbrush Central. I can't remember if this was top road or not, but I remember seeing this because that was 9 years ago. Yeah, so I was knee deep in all that stuff. Yeah.
Let's see if it loads. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, man. It goes by so quickly.
Doesn't it?
Yep, yep. And then stuff too, like the organic process, like Mark's original drawing really only went from like her feet up, and Mark didn't even know me. I had a 1 degree connection with him through Tim Miller, who's a fantastic sculptor who works for does a lot for DC Collectibles. He'd also worked for Sideshow, and so he introduced me to Mark just because I'd found this piece I wanted to do. And so I told Mark, I was like, we need to figure out a base for it. And I was like, what if we did this kind of a Cupid doll, like stuffed plush type thing? And so he just whipped out a sketch real quick, and we just, I don't see if the process pictures are in here or not.
Page
Yeah,
4.
there's oh wow, already on page 4.
Yeah.
Here we go.
And I don't know if it's process, but that's where you put the tutorial of cutting it in Magics and stuff like that, which thankfully you don't need to spend $10,000 for anymore.
I know. Oh my gosh, at the time, like I'd used Magic so much, and at the time they only wrote the software for I found it online just by accident because we needed something that could cut the parts up, and they had only ever really written the software for industrial purposes. And so once they saw what I was doing with it, they're like, do you use this all the time for this? And I was like, well, yeah, that's what I do. And they said, well, you know what, our software engineers only write the software to handle the most complex piece we give them, which up to this point was like an engine block, which geometrically is simple.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you send us some of this geometry for us to rewrite the code? So they actually ended up rewriting and recoding Magics to be able to handle these really intense data sets. So that was really cool.
That's neat. So, yeah, too bad their price point was a little bit out of connection with the market.
I know. I know. At the time it was necessary, and I paid the cash for it, and it profited me like within a month or two after going Sideshow. It paid itself off. But with the advent of ZBrush and live booleans, it's like now literally you can do I spend 98% of my time in ZBrush, and that includes cutting, keying, print prepping. The files that come out of ZBrush as far as for print prep are as clean, if not cleaner, than any other software I've used. And for their price point, it's just phenomenal. I don't have to go on about that,
Yeah. Are you still cutting like this, where like if we go scroll down to where it is, so that you leave this little bit of a lip, and then the key is on the inside?
Yeah, I still do. I still use that exact same technique. Now, as relate to these little pie plates, not so much anymore. Occasionally, I will build pieces like that if it's that specific.
Yeah.
But now, because Dynamesh and all these other processes have, Z-Root mesh and stuff have come into the loop, it's easy for me to sit there and do a basic sculpt, tear the piece off, Dynamesh it, sculpt the lip on it, and then literally I'm just sitting there just keying A from B. I'm not really having to sit there and create these shapes the same way. Now the technique and the end result is still the same, but I don't have to worry about modeling these pieces anymore to do those cuts.
Oh, you mean you just sculpt that cut right in yourself?
Yeah, a lot of times, like say for like, if you can see here, like I'm looking at her legs versus her thighs, I would literally just sculpt the thigh as one piece, tear that off, Dynamesh it, flatten this out, and then I would go over here and then I would actually sculpt, like cut A from B, and then I would sometimes I just sculpt the keys in, but sometimes I do, depending upon time, I'll sit there and just bring in a basic shape, a basic like a trapezoid type shape, and just plug it right in.
Cool. That's awesome. So
but my keys are up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that's 9 years ago. And this piece got you a job at Sideshow, got you client, a really good client, 2 years of work, you said.
Yeah.
And then ultimately was a contributing factor in Legacy.
Yes.
And Legacy, I imagine, led to Marvel.
In a roundabout way, it did. So all the work I'd done, because engineering is engineering. I mean, as long as you can sit there and figure out scale correctly and understand the client needs when it comes to, precision measurements, whether it be on an action figure, a statue, or like a huge prop, like stuff that Legacy makes. Those skills are completely transferable. And that's one thing with my career that I tell a lot of people that are just getting into it is when I first came into this, I was very dead set at I'm going to be in visual effects. That's exactly all I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Jurassic Park. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And then when I got to Gentle Giant, I
Yeah.
saw the 3D printing, and you have to be able to bend with the wind that's driving your career. You have to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and say, this is something I'm interested in, and I'm willing to ride it and see where it takes me because I enjoy it or I see a future in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, it's funny because I thought once I got into collectibles, I thought, okay, like I'm leaving this whole film thing behind. And then roundabout way brings me right back into, like I said, my dream job, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome because you literally sculpt superheroes all day.
Yeah. Yeah. All day long, all day
Yeah.
long.
What did you do on Ghostbusters?
Ghostbusters. Let me see. I may only have one picture up of this.
Mm-hmm.
If I could bring up the guns she has, I built those guns.
Sweet.
Um, Let me see. I don't know if I can. Now, when I'm sharing screen here, is it actually sharing my desktop or is it sharing the full desktop?
It
Correct.
should be your desktop. I see your file browser right now.
Okay. Do you see my file browser? Okay.
Huh?
Let me see if this will actually open. Okay.
Ah,
Now
there we go.
can you see? Okay. This was a concept by Ryan. This was in the Thor art book.
Yeah.
This was one of the base concepts we start with. So like you can see here where we ended up taking like the shoulder rig from that,
Mm-hmm.
forearm rig,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the belt stuff. So I started with a conglomeration of a lot of these type art pieces to work through. Let me see if let me jump up here. USB folio. Let me see, where are we? Is Ghostbusters in here? Film. It's not in there. Oh well.
That's
Um, so yeah, they also had another piece in there which was called the ghost chipper.
uh-huh.
And that would suck them in the front and basically shoot slime out the back. And so I did those for Quantum Creation Effects.
Yeah.
Great place, Christian and the gang over there.
And
But
that's
yeah, that was
freelance?
all freelance. Now, when I moved out here, I came in to work in house
Mm-hmm.
for Legacy, and then I was there for about 2 years. And then after that, like I went straight into working with Jose Fernandez over at Ironhead, working on Batman versus Superman.
Crazy
Um,
talented guy.
yeah, man. Jose, he's like, sounds cliche, but he is the artist.
Yeah.
Amazing working with him, amazing watching him work.
Yeah.
And so I worked with him on that, a few other projects. And that's when I just went into the freelance circuit for about another 2.5 to 3 years. I worked with him on some projects. I worked with Film Illusions, with Russ and his crew, and then over with Christian at Quantum Creation Effects. All three of them are just top-notch guys, top-notch studios.
Yeah.
And I was still, the funny thing is even though I was doing a bulk of Marvel work when I was at Legacy, when I was at the other studios, I was still doing, some Marvel work, and that kept me in that loop with Ryan and Josh and the gang, which eventually led to the job here.
Sweet. So, how much does this work that you do for the film? How much of that goes into the actual collectible of the character?
Oh, so are you talking about in reference to the work I'm doing here at Marvel? How much makes it in?
Yeah, and then I kind of wanted to know how your background in collectibles working with you now, or for you.
Like I said, so many of these skills are completely transferable. So, like say we would sometimes when you're working in collectibles, you don't get full assets.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of, let me see if I can bring it up here. If I have, go back up here to collectibles. See if DC, where is? Should organize this better, but DC.
Then you wouldn't be an artist; you'd be an accountant.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yep.
I know, right?
I hear that all the time. I should just be more structured. And then I used to say that.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I was more structured, then I'd be in a different job.
Yeah, exactly. So like, let's see if this is going to open or not. There we go. So which I don't have a picture of, ironically, the piece I'm going to talk about. I don't have a picture of his helmet on here.
Mm-hmm.
For these that I did for DC,
Yeah.
we would receive sometimes highly detailed assets, sometimes very limited assets. In his case, we did receive a fairly nice retopped model with zero texturing and zero fine detailing. So with this case, they're relatively easy to do, except for the fact that they wouldn't give us the helmet to work on.
Yeah.
And so I had to sit there and figure out, well, what am I going to do to get this helmet? Like, I could sculpt it from scratch, but they were being like the client, rightly so, was being so stringent upon making sure it actually matched what was in the film. I had 36 watermarked photographs of the helmet. And I was like, well, what can I do with this? Well, I knew somebody that had a copy of Agisoft PhotoScan, which if anybody that's in on this hasn't heard of photogrammetry when it relates to scanning, look it up. That's the future of and actually the reality of things now, but it's increasingly the future of scanning. I was able to plug in those 36 watermarked photographs and generate accurate scan data that at the end of it, this is funny, this is always how it usually ends up being. You go ahead, you make this model, you sculpt it, and then at the end of the process, sometimes they'll be like, oh, by the way, here's the finished the VFX 3D model that you wanted like 3 weeks ago. And you're like, I've already done it. And so I compared the base scan data volume-wise and where the details laid, compared it in my finished one to the VFX final model, and it was like 95 to 98% just dead nuts, like that accurate. The point I say in relation to what you're saying is like, how does this work through? I deal with a lot of the same stuff here. I still deal with using scan data, figuring out how to utilize it, even if the scan data didn't turn out so great. So the same skills that I use for figuring out things with collectibles are the same things I use for figuring out stuff with props, and are the same things I figure out that I use here at Marvel, because and as it relates to those skills transferring to Marvel, a big part of the concept is also being able to present, if it's going to be a wearable costume, is to being able to present an accurate representation of the idea. Yeah. So being able to use scan data and say, okay, well, based upon my experience with Legacy and the other studios, I know that they can safely build up a muscle suit this thick without impeding an actor. Or we can build shoes that function this way around an actor's foot and then still be comfortable. So all that past experience of the visual effects or the practical effects side of it came right into play in helping out with the concept stuff here at Marvel.
It totally makes sense. I get that. Okay, so cool. So now maybe we should try to get ourselves into ZBrush. I'd love to just see a model. So that, because render is one thing, and then I'd love to just see it so people understand. Because, a lot of times we expect certain things, but when you're a professional, those expectations are out the door because you got deadlines, you got, people that aren't as demanding as we might be on ourselves.
Yeah. All right, let me see if I can get this going. If this crashes, forgive me. Yeah. This is a really... Now, this was just for a concept model for a piece we did for the book signing. Can you see it? Can you see the...
Totally.
Let me see if I can... Apparently my... hang on, let me try this. Oh, this is P2. Hang on.
And you got solo one.
Yeah, it should be... why are you not... Another reason I ended up changing computers on here was because you should just be able to hold shift and turn all these on, but it's not working for some reason. We'll go through one by one. You'll see just basically how it got built up. And I am like, one thing because these files are so heavy.
Yeah. We're looking
one thing
huge, 111 million already.
Yeah. And that's one thing, as long as the computer can handle it, I'll work really heavy and then I'll boil it down at the end. When the computer screams at me, I can't take any more, that's when I'm like, okay, all right, we'll back it off. And also too, like you see, like I try to naming conventions, because that's one thing. But when it was just me working on my own, turning over just a deliverable, I was just turning over STL files, and that's all I had to worry about being organized about. But in film, these files, they're going to so many people, and they need to have, I don't want them to open it up and just curse my name for it being like part number 27, part number 52. Yeah. So I always try to be extremely descriptive in my organization when I turn over a file, which I think is the thing I see some people neglect quite a bit.
I'm fascinated by this arrow.
Yes. Okay. Organization is because this is one thing. I just made a quick dirty thing in Shadowbox. Personally with me, I hate the idea of having everything in one insanely long subtool list. Totally. There is there's a plugin out there, like I won't mention the name, that I tried that was supposed to help with organization. But it was, for me, I found it to be really, really buggy. And so I do a little version of that myself where I just have this arrow, and that helps me to say, okay, well, all his shoe parts are below here. All his helmet stuff is below here. And it's for me, but it's also trying to take into consideration the guys that are going to look at it coming after me, because VFX, as you know, is extremely high pressure environment. And so anything to make their lives easier, I'm always trying to think of ways that I can make, because that is kind of my job here at Marvel to a certain extent, is to make the concept artists' lives easier by helping them to see their concept in the round and figure things out. And so I always try to have that mindset of how can I improve everybody's experience after I work on something. Because if my work can look great, it can render great, but if they're having trouble opening and if they're having trouble figuring out what part goes where, then they may end up just not have enough time and have to take a shortcut and just look at one 2D image that doesn't fully describe the piece in the round, and then we don't end up getting a final model that looks the way we intended it to look. Because
VFX had to do it their own way.
Yeah, because, like I said, they're on very tight deadlines, and so like I said, I try to do everything I can. I even take suggestions. I'll walk up to guys like that I'm working with, whether it be a practical effects guy, the visual effects guys, and say, what can I do to make life easier? What am I doing that you look at me and you curse my name and be like, why?
That's awesome.
So yeah, I think this will be the last piece I turn on if it comes on, because my poor little laptop here, like I'm running a machine that has 64 gigs of RAM. This poor little thing here is like 20 something, so it's chugging the best it can.
Free memory 8, active 12. Yeah, that is a lot.
Yeah, that poly count is just murder. And this head that's going to come up is going to lag it pretty hard. Now this head that comes up, another thing too, like all of us here at Marvel, we work as a team, which is very interesting. There's even though multiple guys may be working on concepts for different ideas for the same thing, it's all complete camaraderie. It's not pitting one against another. And because we'll all, all the guys will sit there and talk to each other and critique, come over here, look at mine, and come over here and look at mine. And it's there's none of the pitting anybody against each other.
That's awesome.
It's like it's pulling it off the screen here. Maybe I'll have to turn that. There it goes.
All right, so let's unpack some of what we've seen already, so you don't have to move the screen.
All right, I'm gonna turn this head off. Then we can at least let's look at Hulk here.
Okay, yeah.
If it drags too much, I have the final render of this, and we can.
There we go.
Come on, you can do it. There we go. All right. Ow.
Too far. No,
it's the new document. It's always fun, man. It always happens when you're sitting trying to show people stuff. I had a bug on mine once where I say it's a bug. It is user error, no doubt. Where I was sitting there using a tool in Zbrush, and Ian Joyner, anybody who's not familiar with him.
Oh yeah, great,
amazing concept artist. Look at me drawing another one. The tool wasn't working right, and he's like, "Oh no, this is how you use it." I was like, "Okay," and I went over there and I did it. Okay, I thought I was doing it right. And
let me stop you right there. The
sure,
document double.
yeah,
Did you double the size?
yeah,
Yeah, that's going to be one of the biggest memory hogs.
really.
Yeah,
I've always done it because I hate the anti-aliasing
I
or the
understand. Yeah,
aliasing that
yeah.
happens, and so let's see who's gonna do it for us. You gonna do it? All right, then I'll just do it again, and we just won't do it. There we go. No, we'll just draw it like this. All right, all right. Well, we'll deal with the aliasing. You force my hand.
Yeah.
There we go. So yeah, like we're looking at a massive amount of points here. Let me try to zoom in on it. Like I said, and that's another thing too, since whenever I turn over, like this model here in this pose was specifically just for rendering.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't concerned at all about poly count because my big rig in there could handle it. It was towards the end of just creating a 2D image. But anytime, say, I'm going to send out an asset to a vendor,
Yeah.
I'll always optimize. I get rid of my layers because another thing too. I'm a layer hog, and some of the guys here kind of make fun of me about it because by the time a concept comes to me, we're doing so much finessing and back and forth that we're just changing so many details that I literally just start putting stuff on layers because sometimes we'll say no, that doesn't work, and they'll end up coming right back to that later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll always optimize my files at the very end whenever that file's going out. Get rid of my layers, get rid of whatever is not needed to basically pack that file down. So again, so they're not cursing my name like I'm cursing my own name right now for not having optimized this before a meeting.
All right, so there's a ton of subtools here.
A ton, yes.
Like there's the what talk to me about your process. So when you're creating these, are these extractions? Are these in Maya or Max, or how are you pulling these out?
Pretty much, I only use Maya for cleaning up a retopped mesh that I've already done in Zbrush usually.
Okay.
I used to start and do a ton in Maya and then bring it over, but I found that for me now, just building a straight, like say the big Q-tip, or actually this is supposed to be an homage to American Gladiator, this big padded pugilistic things they used to try to knock each other off with.
Yeah.
Like this was completely built in ZBrush through the Z modeler, which I love Z modeler. But then other things like say, like the slime or the blood from the dragon, that was just literally like a masked extraction that I then smooth inflated and then use like snake hook or move to pull around to get the drip effect.
Mm-hmm.
His helmet, let me see if I can get up here and isolate select his helmet. Where are we? There's that. Let me just will alt click work? Let's find out. No, it doesn't. All right, let's go down here and see if I can locate it. Things like his helmet are just complete extractions.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with straps. Like sometimes I'll do just based upon how complex it's going to be, I will either leave it in extraction. Sometimes I'll sit there and just do let the Z remesher take it over.
Yeah.
But when precision is really important, like let's say it wasn't going to go on a digital character, let's say it was going to go on actual talent.
Yeah.
I will take all the time and do a complete retop on a model to make sure that, like say, if something's going to be covering their ears, like say, for example, like way back in Avengers 1 type thing, like a cap helmet back then or something,
Right.
so that I can actually have that scan in there and based upon the knowledge I've gotten through working in practical effects, present an accurate image of what is achievable on that on a prosthetic like a helmet.
Yeah. And why all the subtools for like the foot? Because you've got like a heel and then you've got another one. What keeps you from putting those in as one group?
Sometimes, in this case, it was just how fast it had to go out.
Okay.
Usually I will sit there and group mirrored stuff together and just keep everything together. But in this case, it was just one of those times to where, like I said, sometimes in film stuff goes out extremely quickly.
Yeah.
And in this case, the end result was just to render. This model was not going out to visual effects. So let's zoom in on this. Was not going out to visual effects. So like I said, I just put it to the side since I knew what I was looking at, you know. Mm-hmm. So let me see. You can see how. Let me turn off.
Yeah, I mean, if
You
I'm
can see
correct,
that's
that's a lot.
just that's just a polished model that's
Uh-huh.
been Z remeshed, projected. So
And all
and
right,
yeah,
so I know we're gonna hit some timeline here with you, so let's get some questions. And thank you so much for going in depth on all this, man. So cool. Why don't we leave it at your art station, and
okay.
I'll read the questions out. That way, those who are watching get to see some artwork. Let me go through. Now's time to post, guys. I'm going to look over here and go to meeting. Matthew's asking, is the proxy mesh like the helmet Z remesh? Just answered that
Yeah.
pretty quickly, so we got that. Corinne is asking, do you work from scans or busts from the actor? So how much scan data do you get, I guess, if any?
We try to get as much as possible. Most of the time, like I am able to get my hands on some scan data
Mm-hmm.
at some point. And sometimes we'll have to go in and request it because it may be visual effects that has that data at that time because they've gone ahead and started a process for that character.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I work off of concepts. Okay, in the concept phase, having scan data available since we are so early in the process. If we have them from another film, like they've been in a prior film, then
Mm-hmm.
we'll have some scan data available from a prior scan.
Okay.
But if they're new to a film, then that means that will be at the end of the process, and that's when I'll sit there and take a model I've done a concept for, and then refit that to their either their current scan data or to, like I said, new actor to their first scan data we've ever received for them.
Okay, got it. And Isaac is asking how much RAM memory. We actually covered that, but he's asking specifically in terms of photogrammetry. So,
Oh, for the photogrammetry you're talking about, in
yeah,
order to create, if you're talking about, and like when I created the scan data for
yeah,
that DC piece,
yeah,
I actually did that here on this machine. I compiled it on this machine here.
cool. 20
And
gigs.
this machine only yeah, it's like 20 something. I think it has 8 that are permanent, and it had like 2 or 3. It was really strange because this machine only had like 2 or 3 other
Mm.
um, open ports on it. So at the time, it was somewhere between 12 and 24 or whatever I have in it now.
All right. And then Jose Lauro is asking, do you mostly create models in ZBrush or do you do portions in Maya? And so we definitely covered that, Jose. So let me know, Jose, if you got any more questions on that. All right. Any other questions, guys? You got about 30 more seconds to push that one out. So I'm going to ask kind of one of the last questions, Adam. You came from Savannah College. You put a lot of your own money and time, obviously your own time, but some of your own money into to kind of further your career. What do you think really helped you succeed? Like, what if there was one thing that is just really core to your success about the way that you approach your art? What do you think that would be? Oops, we lost Adam. Hold on one sec, guys. I think his computer just totally died right before my last question. Yeah, Jason, I was interested in the response too. Give it a second, he'll notice. And then he's just got to come back in and join. But if the system crashed, that's a bit of a problem. That's a couple minutes. So why don't I open this up to you guys while we're locked on the screen? We'll be locked on the screen for about 3 minutes, and then it messes things up. What are you hearing in this? Give me something that you're hearing in this talk with Adam. One revelation that you've got. All right, several of you guys in here. So let me hear a revelation ASAP. David, I don't know. He has never mentioned Substance Painter, so but he did mention that almost all of his texturing is ZBrush. Okay, so David is picking up a revelation of practice. Isaac, I want more than that though. David, give me something else. What do you guys think is special about the way that Adam's approaching these things? Adam's back on the web, and then Isaac is saying that it's very important to have other artists in mind when creating pieces and to have it organized. Yeah,
Are you there? Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
I just lost you. Like I don't know if you noticed, like it just
Oh yeah.
completely just shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. We noticed.
Okay, so what? Yeah, what were the questions? For the questions you had?
Yeah. Let me switch you over as a presenter, just in case it
Okay.
screws up something here real quick. And you just share your screen, not a. Yeah.
All right, there we go.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Everything's back. Hold on one sec. They're just
Sure.
commenting. Edison, what was the first Marvel toy that you have? Jose, modeling pathway. So Jose, Laura was learning modeling pathways are not a straight line. They're all out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Matthew was learning be flexible and willing to adapt to new opportunities. Anything worth investing the time and effort into is worth investing the money in.
Mm-hmm.
And doing so can pay off in the long term. Industry connections can take you far. That's what Matthew picked up.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Jason, the art is less of his job than how he approaches it. Or maybe that's where the value is. So how you approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissus, similar processes. Anthony, having your ear to the ground for new tech and instructing the community on it. Yeah, and Anthony, I don't know how you feel about this, Adam, but Anthony, I'd rephrase it. It's not new tech so much, although that's a factor, and it's something I teach in the environment boot camp. You know, like for example, we had a webinar with James Raitosa, who scored an amazing job, didn't even go to college, and it was because he focused on substance designer and he had some serious hard surface skills. So, and he did a lot of education. So there's definitely the new stuff, but for me, it's
Good. I was gonna say education. Like back when you got to remember, I started college 20 years ago, and back then, like Gnomon didn't even exist as far as I remember back 20 years ago. Or if they did, I'd never heard of them. So you had like Otis, you had SCAD, and Full Sail. Like I heard about while I was at SCAD. But if you wanted that route, that was where the only place you could get the exposure, because that's the only people that could afford to have labs that had computers that were that expensive. I mean. So now with things like what you're doing, Ryan, and with Gnomon and your ability to sit there and get so much of this information without having to leave your house by signing up through online classes, I'd say college is almost a complete, not to knock it, but college is almost a completely moot point for what we do here.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And Anthony, just to add that I think the key thing is you educate about your processes. So it's not about keeping an ear out for the tech, the new stuff, but what do you do? What are the problems you encounter? And then give yourself permission to kind of share that and teach it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what got me to this point was literally being a problem solver. It's not because like I'm a great artist or I don't consider myself ultra creative in that sense of like, you know, like Ryan and the rest of the gang. But whenever a problem is presented,
I want to be clear, he's talking about Minerding.
Minerding. Yes. I was about coworkers. Yeah. I haven't worked with you yet. I haven't worked with you yet. But yeah, so it's like it's always being, like you said, always being a problem solver is what led me to where I'm at now, and being willing to follow those paths wherever they take you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that actually answers the question I had right when we lost you, which was like, what was the skill that really helped you move forward? And if I'm correct, then it's really just being a problem solver and being focused on, you know, solving those problems, educating about those problems, and being somebody who figures that stuff out. Do you think that's accurate?
I think that, and like a sub thing under that I would add is if a piece of new technology or software comes your way and it piques your interest, you know, go head first into it. I mean, at the time, 3D printing was only a supplementary to another process. It wasn't this full-blown thing, and I just ran with it, and it became this full-blown process. And that's what, like I said, that's what got me to this point.
That's great.
So looks like I need to wrap it up. We're here in the conference room, so I had it between 1 and 2.
All right.
So
I
I need to go ahead and vamoose.
I appreciate the time, man, and I really appreciate Marvel giving us this time too. And thank you, Adam, for being here, for sharing your wisdom and all that stuff. And for those of you
Yeah,
guys,
thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for asking me. It's been great.
yeah, it's fantastic. So take care of yourself, everybody. Character
Ditto.
guys,
Ditto.
you know where to
Take care.
find. All right, talk to you later.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.